Alright. Hello, I'm Donovan Heinze, and this is my presentation called Who Are Aspira's People? Golden Kamui and Ainu Representation Through a Fandom Studies Lens. So here's my outline. We're going to be going over going to present two research questions. Then I'm going to dig a little bit into the background, including who are the Ainu, what is Golden Kamui, and then discuss why include the fandom, including going to be including some current academic work, and then looking beyond just the content. Then we're going to look at my anime list and a general overview of the reviews for the show, and then we're going to discuss the Golden Kamui fan wiki and the Golden Kamui subreddit, and then I will present my conclusions. So first off, my research questions are: what can be learned about Ainu representation in Golden Kamui from from analysis of the fandom, and do some previous academic critiques of Golden Kamui that focus on the content get reinforced by adding the context of the fandom? So first off, to any discussion about representation means we need to talk about who's actually represented. So we have the Ainu. They're indigenous people of southern Sakhalin, Hokkaido, and the Kuril Islands. They have a complicated history with the Yamato Japanese, or Wajin. I will be using Wajin for the rest of this presentation because that is a very common term within academic works talking about Ainu. And in particular important, this long complicated history includes reaches far back as far back as the Ashikaga Bakufu. In the 1400s. And then Hokkaido was formally annexed by Japan in 1896 by the Meiji government, and later in the 20th and 19th century, the Ainu faced a series of forced assimilation policies, and this extended into the early 20th century. So what is Golden Kamui? Golden Kamui is a manga which was later adapted into an anime. The manga ran from 2014 to 2022, and the anime has been running from 2018 to currently. There's 31 volumes of manga with 4 seasons. It is set after the Russo-Japanese War in 1907. And the mangaka is Nado Satoru. He has a stated goal of edutainment. The idea behind this was to educate the audience about Ainu culture, language, and various aspects of it through the use of manga and anime to encourage cultural understanding. And in particular, two important characters to know for this dynamic is Aspira. She is the Deuteranus of the manga and anime. She's an Ainu huntress who helps the main protagonist, Saichi Sugimoto. And they're both looking for a gold that was stolen from the Ainu. So why include the fandom? So first, starting off with some academic work, we have Educating with Indigeneity. This is an academic paper by Rita Ito. This paper primarily analyzes Golden Kamui's use of language, with the perspective of ratio-linguistics. Two things of note, two particular areas of things that she notes, is the use of food scenes as a form of as a form of as a form of cultural exchange between Lajin and Ainu, um, and is also a major and is on how a lot of cultural transmission happens, um, and respect is built up. She also talks about the use of the Ainu word osama throughout the manga and anime, in particular on how it means the word shit in Japanese, but it's used for comedic effect within the manga. Um, she does critique the effectiveness of the edutainment of the show, despite acknowledging that that Naruto Satoru has a good intent behind this. In particular, she criticizes the time set for the manga, which is after the Russo-Japanese War, because this was during the time period when forced assimilation, where Ainu language and cultural practices were suppressed and forbidden from being allowed to be spoken or to happen. And while she does predominantly look at the content of the anime in the first season, she also acknowledges fan discussion, albeit a bit briefly in her conclusion. And now for another more recent analysis of Golden Kamuy. This is the paper is Ainu Representation in the World of Japanese Comics by Sophia Keller. And one of the particular things that she makes an argument for is manga as a place of memory. The idea is manga can serve as a way of redefining this point in history to reflect what the cultural desires are of the time. They also discuss at length the Meiji colonization of the island of Hokkaido. Makes a very strong argument that I would agree with, that Japanese colonialism and imperialism started with Hokkaido instead of Taiwan, which is widely acknowledged. And one of the things that was used to justify this colonial colonization was that Hokkaido was an empty land. And the Ainu were not there at all, despite them being forcibly removed from their land. So they go on to discuss two manga. First is Shumari by Tezuka. They note that he rejects the empty land colonial narrative with the use of the in Shumari, but the Ainu still fall into a very stereotype where they're defenseless, pacifistic. Things just happen to them. And in particular of note is they talk about the woman character, the female love interest for the protagonist ends up being killed, and she does not end up playing a significant role in actually being her own agent. And then we go on to Golden Kamuy. The author acknowledges that the Ainu, in this case, are actually able to be their own agents. They're actually able to decide what happens, and is generally a better representation, but also acknowledges that despite this attempt to fully reject a lot of stereotypes about the Ainu, they end up falling into the trap of historical revisionism by failing to acknowledge the suppression of Ainu culture during the late 19th century and early 20th century. And this work is very content focused. This is more focused on the content of the mangas and their impact. There's no mention of the fan base at all. So why look at fandom? So first off, fandom is a contact zone. So a contact zone is social spaces where cultures meet, clash, grapple with each other, and often in contexts of highly asymmetrical relationships of power. And one of the other key things to fandom as a contact zone is authenticity is a key part of a lot of online fandom. And so a lot of people in these fandom spaces are who might want to find out more about the Ainu, especially since they're in a position of higher power, might want or have to grapple with this idea of how to be an authentic fan of the show while also dealing with while also being properly respectful to uh, to people both in Japanese cultures but also to the Ainu as well. Um, and then fandom is also a place of tuning in or embeddedness. People do art. And what I mean by that is it's more than just the mangaka paints, like draws the pic, does the research, draws the manga, and that manga is the final piece of things. Fandom is an important place for tuning in and embeddedness because if you are actively reading this, you're actively tuning in into the actual work, and you're bringing in your own biases, uh, but you're also actively engaging with the product. And embeddedness is also in the case of like it's like what's pulled from it, and in particular of interest is how does fandom engage with the embeddedness of like edutainment, as which is something that is accepted, but these people who might want to learn more about the culture. So to kind of dive into this, I feel like it's important to look into Golden Kamuy fandom in 3 different sections: reviews, fan wikis, and discussions. Reviews are very good for determining on how people tune in and how it serves as a first point of contact. Fan wikis and discussions are really good for just looking into the embeddedness of the of the fandom and its culture. So now to get to the actual fandom analysis. So first off, we're starting off with my anime list with the Golden Kamuy reviews. There are 66 total written reviews, with an average score of 7.88 for the first season. Um, what I noticed with the positive elements of the reviews is there's a lot of praise for Aspira and Ainu cultural inclusion, mostly viewed as a positive by a lot of people within that. They're often talking about the different cultural artifacts, like the food, the language, the fact that they're included are things that are viewed as a very positive by the people leaving their reviews. Another positive element is that for some people, this is actually a point of learning about the Ainu for the first time. Even for people who are very invested in Japanese culture, embedded in learning about it, and very embedded in anime, they might not have heard about the Ainu before. So this is a very good thing that a series that's aiming to positively represent the Ainu, that this is actually a point of learning. But for all this praise, there are some negative elements. The historical context is limited to what's presented in the anime. There's not usually a lot of discussion. There's no discussion about the actual historical suppression of the Ainu. And not everyone who left a review. There's in particular one review that was left on my anime list that viewed the inclusion of the food scenes in Ainu culture as a point of distraction from what they consider the good stuff, the fight scenes. This sense that some people might not like the fact that the Ainu culture is actually incorporated in the show, and they view it as a distraction. And this last one is the use of the word tribe, or Aspira's tribe, or the Ainu tribe. The reason why this is a point of negative, the reason why this is a negative element is this limits the Ainu to one group of people, when historically speaking they are a series of they're different groups of people. They're not one centralized group. They have different people all over the place. And so calling them a tribe reduces them to one central people. Now moving on to the Golden Kamuy fan wiki. There's a centralized page with other links that focuses on the Ainu. And they have a pretty decent history of the Ainu, but there is some key aspects that make it not ideal. One of the major things is that it overlooks on how the Ainu were treated in the Edo period. Because in the Edo period, before and after, they were treated as basically second-class citizens by the Matsumae clan, who were the people in charge of Hokkaido for majority of the Edo period. They were not allowed to speak. They were not allowed to learn Japanese. They were not allowed to. They were purposely kept to be treated as lesser than the Japanese or the Wajin. So by overlooking this, they're overlooking a major part of the complicated history between the Wajin and the Ainu. Then moving on to Ainu words, they actually discuss it. This is something really good. The way they go about it is they have it by two of the Ainu groups. And they have it broken down in the Ainu, the way it's spelled in Ainu, the katakana, the meaning, and what chapter you can find that word used in for the first time. So this is a very good way to say you want to actually search up an Ainu word. You don't have access to an Ainu English dictionary or an Ainu Japanese dictionary. This is a good way to search things up. And there's also a link to all the different Ainu characters that can be found in the manga and anime, which is like a really good way. And then they talk about the Ainu cultural objects, especially the food and the clothing. They particularly focus on what is in the manga or anime. This can be both a good and a bad thing. It can be a good thing because it can be backed up by what's in the actual manga and anime. So that way it's actually relying on the work. The reason why this can be bad is in case someone wants to do further research, which in fact leads me into my next point: sourcing. It is either found in the manga or anime or on Wikipedia. And if this is the only way someone is relying on research, this is not exactly the best way of going about it, especially if someone does not know how to use Wikipedia properly for finding sources. Now to talk about the discussions part. And for this analysis, I'm focusing primarily on r/Golden Kamuy. a subreddit that focuses on discussion about Golden Kamuy, and this is where things, I think, start to take a more positive turn in Ainu representation throughout the fandom. Uh, First off, they talk about Ainu topics outside of Golden Kamuy. There's a mention of Ainu Mosir, a film that was released back in 2020 about an Ainu boy, a boy of Ainu descent, growing up in Japan. They talk about John Batchelor's dictionary, for Ainu Japanese and English grammar. While John Batchelor is a very controversial figure in terms of Ainu studies, he's still a very reliable source for learning more about the Ainu language, especially because he did this when the language was still an active language. And then they also mentioned Ghost of Yotei. As long as the discussion's focused on Ainu, this means that they're not against encouraging people to do further research into Ainu studies and try to actually learn more about the Ainu from more than just the manga, which is really good for helping diversify one's knowledge on the Ainu and other groups. And then there's also the discussions on Ainu in the context of the show. There's like one discussion in particular on the perception of the show by someone of Ainu descent, viewing it as racist. But a lot of the discussion is very nuanced, and they are willing to accept the fact that someone might actually view the show as racist, and it is a completely fair judgment of the show. The fact that they're willing to, that shows as a contact zone an important area that they are willing to accept different perspectives on this and be nuanced. Another post on the subreddit shared a video about the importance of Ainu culture and history to the show. And this was actually very encouraging because it's like they're doing research to find more about it and not just relying on what's in the manga to find out more. And they also they have a discussion on the research performed for the show, and while a lot of it is glazing the mangaka for the amount of research that he has done, it shows that they don't just critically accept it without reason. And I also feel like an important part of this element is discussing the moderation. As I mentioned earlier with the Ghost of Yotei, they allow for media outside of Golden Kamuy to be discussed as long as it's on the Ainu. This shows a really good stance of encouraging people to do further research into Ainu and actually try to come up with to develop a good understanding. And it makes it so that the anime/manga is not the end-all be-all for learning about Ainu. They also take an active. This one might be a little bit more mixed, but they also feel like they've also taken action against racism within r/Golden Kamuy. And the reason why I say a bit mixed is because there might be some people who might say some things, but it's generally, I view this as a good thing. Now to get into my conclusions. Ito's and Keller's critiques of Golden Kamuy hold up with the added context provided from a fandom analysis. This is mainly reflected in what is seen from reviews and the fan wiki, in particular the shortcomings and negative elements from the tribe to the not so good sourcing. But the Golden Kamuy fandom can also be an avenue for further understanding about the Ainu as a contact zone, as the fandom shows a curiosity to discuss and learn about the Ainu, and are willing to listen to criticism of the show. This is something that is very important for developing a healthy intellectual mind when studying things, and this shows that the embeddedness is one of the embedded features of this is the fact that people are willing to learn and want to learn. And thanks for listening. And here are all my sources.